Well, hello, good evening. Welcome to our site, Your Light. And my name is Rebeca Eigen. I'm an astrologer in Houston, Texas. And my title tonight is Shadow Work Can Heal Years of Relationship Struggles. And I'm going to share my screen because I would like to show you all something. So let me do that. I actually recently went to Waxahachie to speak at a wellness expo. And the very first couple that came to sit down with me at my table to have a consultation said to me, what is seventh house and what is shadow? And so I had to briefly explain that to them. And the other thing was, what is an alchemist? That always brings up a lot of questions for people. And so they said to me after the consultation, wow, an astrological marriage and relationship fixer, who would have thought? And so I ended up getting to stay with them for the weekend, this couple that I met, because of a variety of things that happened that day. At any rate, he went into my website the next morning or Sunday morning, and he was like, you need to change all of this. Nobody's going to know what you do. You're only reaching 1% of people. You need to reach 99% of people because this is so valuable. This was very valuable to us. And so I came home, and at first I resisted, but the second couple that came to me that day, she said the words, you fixed us, you healed us all the way back to childhood. Well, I don't know if I really healed them all the way back to childhood, but she said that, but she used the word fixed. And so I came home and I remembered that one of my clients and one of my consultation clients and website clients, because I'm a graphic designer and I did their website as well. She also a year ago said to me, why are you calling yourself an alchemist? Nobody knows what that is. And, take seventh house off. You need to just talk about marriage and relationships. And I'm like, no, because I like it, and I was very attached to that title. Well, after these two couples in a row sat down with me, I decided, you know what, the universe is talking to me. And I have an agreement with the universe. If I'm not getting something, give it to me 3 times and I promise I will listen. So I listened and I came home, and once I started doing the artwork of the yin and yang and the symbol of the moon in the background and just creating the artwork itself, it felt better. And so then I added it to my website and proceeded. So this is what this is all about. It's about recognizing that we have these opposites. This is a quote by Carl Jung and another quote that I really love, and I'm going to read it to you all. The psychological rule says that when an inner situation is not made conscious, it happens outside as fate. That is to say that when the individual remains undivided and does not become conscious of his inner opposites, the world must perforce act out the conflict and be torn into opposing halves. And then this one, I looked and looked, and this I came to see that what I thought was you and you was really me and me. So I found those 2 quotes to be really valuable and realized that the shadow in us is that part of all of us that is unconscious. It's denied, it's repressed, it's hidden from our awareness. We don't know about it. And we don't want to know about it. I mean, the curious thing is that it is both positive and negative. But Jung's theory of opposites is that whatever's conscious in ourself, the opposite is in our unconscious to the same degree. So the psyche itself is a self-regulating system that maintains its equilibrium just as the body does. And all these parts of us go into the unconscious, both positive and negative. And everyone has a shadow. This is not something that 1 or 2 people have. We all have a shadow. the shadow is archetypal. And what an archetype simply means is that it is typical and conscious for everyone. We all have a shadow, and nobody escapes not having a shadow. But another thing about our shadow is that it's like a blind spot. It acts like a blind spot, like a part of us that's behind us or hidden from our awareness. We don't know that we have it. And that part of us is actually living against us because we aren't aware of these parts of us. And so it's super important for us to learn about our shadow. And what you'll see is that you'll find out things about yourself that you don't know. And the higher our ideals are, based on this compensatory factor in the psyche that it compensates for us when we're out of balance, the higher our ideals are, the darker our unconscious is getting. So we actually want to be in balance. We want to see both sides of ourselves. And I'll explain that further. But this is a diagram of what he called it's a simple diagram about what he saw in our unconscious. And the very far outer circle is what we know about ourselves. The word persona comes from the word personare, which we also get the word personality from. And in astrology, we call that our rising sign. Well, our shadow is directly behind that. And so it is the first step for all of us to go into our own unconscious. And the way that we all do this is that we project our shadow onto other people. And Carl Jung said, projections change the world into a replica of one's own unknown face. The key here is that we don't know we're doing it. The unconscious has projected itself out. It's not of our own volition. We don't decide, well, I'm going to project. No, it happens automatically. It is a psychological term, and everyone does it. And so experience is our teacher. We all recognize that we project. After a while, we've heard that term, projection, but what we don't know is we're not the ones doing it. So only unconscious contents get projected. Once something's become conscious, projection ceases. And as far as self-knowledge is concerned, it's a matter of utilizing these projections as mirrors, a task that is possible with the use of these Jungian concepts. And that's from John Sanford from the book Invisible Partners, which is a really great book about the anima and animus inside all of us, which is the male and female principles in the psyche that are also part of us that we don't know. But often when we're projecting onto another person, one of the clues about it is that we will not be able to stand a person. So raise your hand. Have you ever met anyone you couldn't stand? And by the same token, have you ever fallen madly in love? Well, say hello to your shadow, because the shadow is either too high or too low. And when it's too high, then we are idealizing, and idealization is another ego defense, which is what projection is. It's an ego defense. Our ego doesn't want to know about it, and so we project it. And when we meet someone, we've all met people that we don't like. Well, if we meet someone and we go on and on ad nauseum about that person, and we even recognize our voice changing pitch and start making emphatic statements. A long time ago, when I was starting to do this work, and I had actually written my book, I went to California, to San Diego, and I was sitting at lunch with some strangers. I mean, the person that I went to visit in San Diego was sitting there at the table, and then a couple of her friends came up and sat down. And one girl was like highly charged, and she was going on and on about this person, about this friend. And her voice was changing pitch. So it is really interesting when you hear somebody doing that. And she was saying things that were like emphatic, like she's a user and she doesn't have anything to talk about. She makes people feel so uncomfortable to be around her, and she's using Mike, our friend, she's using him. And she was just livid about this girl. And I'm just sitting there observing this, and I'm thinking to myself, well, this is her shadow. She just doesn't know about it. And so when we see something in another person like that, and we go on and on ad nauseum, and our energy changes, we get a charge about it, that's a sure way to know that we are projecting a part of our own shadow. So there's this enemy making process inside of all of us. We will make enemies out of people who are carrying our dark side. And, you know, most of us are aware after a while, when somebody is madly in love with somebody, how they're just like gone. They're not altogether there. They've lost themselves into that person. Well, that's another shadow projection, when you completely lose yourself in another person. And our chart is like a crucifixion. It is. And the first house right here is our persona. It's our mask. It's our ego consciousness. This is what we know. And then our seventh house is 180 degrees opposite. So the seventh house is what we least identify with. We will see it as other people before we will ever see it as a part of ourselves. So that is a real interesting thing to use in your chart to see what you're projecting. Another thing that we project is our mother and our father. And our father is our 10th house and our mother is our 4th house. And sometimes it can be the exact opposite, where our mother is our 10th house and our father is our 4th house. Because if you keep in mind the statement, what's conscious in one is going to be unconscious in the other. And often when people are married, or I see couples charts, they're very much alike, but they split up the energy. I'll be this part if you'll be that part. Or each person will marry one of their parents and try to get their parents to grow up or change, because that was something that bothered them about their parents. And so we're still trying to resolve these unresolved relationships that are primal. And nobody realizes this is what we're doing. I mean, we don't wake up and think, I'm going to marry my mother because I really want to get this worked out. No, we don't do that. We just find out after relationship number 3 that they are all alike, that they're all alike, and that they are often like one of our parents. That is what's so interesting about doing some of this work with our unconscious. And other people that we meet that we don't like, you know, our hair will raise on our arms. We'll get goosebumps. We'll feel repulsed. We'll want to get away from them. People that we want to avoid, well, that's another clue that it's a shadow quality of ourselves. And people will ask me, well, you know, there are some people who are absolutely obnoxious, and why would I want to be anything like that? Well, when we're making that person into an evil person by projecting something onto them, we are not seeing the whole person. So we have tunnel vision into one of their characteristics or qualities, and we'll forget everything good about them and decide that's all they are, because we're projecting our shadow onto that person. And later I'm going to talk about toxic relationships, which is not what shadow projection is about. But for now, I'm just going to tell you a few things about shadow and how we retrieve shadow. The only way we can retrieve shadow is by projecting it. Really, that's the only way that we will learn about ourselves. And it is a lifelong retrieval process. Nobody does this overnight. And there are people who refuse to be in relationships because they've gotten hurt. They say it's too hard. But Jung says the unrelated human being lacks wholeness, because I can only become whole through a vow, through seeing another person outside that is a mirror for me, that is something that I need to learn about myself. And this is not easy. This is not easy work. It's not easy to do, because we're going to see parts of ourselves that we are repulsed by, that we don't like, that we don't want to be. So the shadow is everything that we don't want to be, and the shadow is everything that we want to be. Both are true. We want to be like a person we put on a pedestal, that we worship, that we really highly admire. And we don't want to be anything like a person we find extremely negative. Now, again, negative in the sense that we have a huge charge about it. That's the real, part that shows you that that is your shadow. So we need to ask ourselves, why did I react like that? Why? What does it mean? Why did that push my buttons about that person? And so Ken Wilber says in the book, Meeting the Shadow, which is an anthology of topics on the shadow, from parents to children to at the church, through education, through teachers, through religions. There's all these different essays in the book, Meeting the Shadow. And Ken Wilber says, does it inform you about the person, or does it affect you emotionally? If it affects you emotionally, then it is about you, and it's something that you want to know about yourself. So when you find yourself judging anyone and making emphatic statements about the other person, that's the biggest clue that there is something there. And it takes a lot of moral courage to own your shadow, to see your defenses and your rationalizations, because we all make all these rationalizations about why we feel the way we feel about another person and what they did. And we'll start describing all the details of what they did. Often when people come to me for a consultation, they want to talk about somebody that's bothering them. They want to talk about an issue, a charged issue with a relationship, whether it's a child that they're upset with, or their parents, or their lover. There is some kind of relationship issue going on. And what I love about astrology is that I can listen to the entire story, and then I can help that person go into their own unconscious to see what might be being projected onto the other person. And maybe it's something they actually badly need, that they actually have to learn to integrate within themselves. So the alchemists call, before I say anything about the alchemists, I want to say something about this enemy making process. The enemy is us. These are fear-based pieces of ourselves. Therefore, the radical commandment, love your enemy as yourself, points the way to both self-knowledge and peace. We do, in fact, hate our enemies to the same degree that we hate ourselves. In the image of the enemy, we will see a mirror of ourselves. So that enemy making process that happens is very, very interesting. And if you go into your memory banks and you think of all the people that you X'd out of your life, that you have removed from your life for some particular reason, and you may even rationalize it, and you'll say, we have nothing in common. We don't read the same books. I lost interest in being friends with that person. Well, if we're avoiding that person, if we can't sit in their presence without getting a huge charge, if we can't have a decent conversation with them, if we're avoiding them, that is a part of our own shadow. And so compassion is when we recognize it and can look at ourselves and see, maybe that's something I actually need to develop. Maybe that person is over the top obnoxious, but maybe what I'm seeing, if I looked at it from a different perspective, is somebody who's highly extroverted and has a lot of enthusiasm and excitement and is spreading joy, in what they're doing, but we see it as too much. It's just too much, and we don't want to be around it. Well, go inside your memory banks and think about the different things that have bothered you about other people, especially partners and people that we get really close to, because at first all is well, but with time, things change and life happens, doesn't it? And it's so interesting. And for me, the seventh house is the key. It really is. It is the gold, what the alchemists called our prima materia, which was the dark side of our consciousness. The prima materia is what they called it. And the dark side, again, is what's hidden from our awareness. It isn't necessarily evil. And it doesn't mean we don't have evil, because we all have both dark and light. But the goal is consciousness, not acting out whatever we see, but maybe needing to live some of that in a productive way or in a different fashion than what we're seeing, so that that becomes part of us. As the slide earlier said, once something becomes conscious, it's no longer projected. It isn't. Once we can take that back from the other person, then we can go about figuring out what it is that we need to integrate in ourselves in order to meet our partners in the middle, in order to meet them halfway. And Jung was extremely into alchemy. And the alchemists had this saying, and I love to say it because it's based on this connection that we all have to the cosmos. As above, so below, as within, so without. And Jung called that synchronicity, that there were things inside us that are also outside us that have a parallel meaning. They're acausal, they're not cause and effect. They're part of this energy, this amazing energy that we're all part of. The entire cosmos is inside every person. I don't know if y'all have ever seen that graphic of the man holding his arms out and he has the circle around him. Well, that circle symbolizes this wholeness that we are all striving towards. We're striving to become whole and complete. And that doesn't mean always being good. You know, if somebody's being extremely selfish and you keep repeatedly bringing that selfish person to your face, there is a part of you that is sacrificing, that is in denial, that you have a selfish part. And another thing that can happen is that our mother was like that. And we're like, my mother was like that, but I'm not. And then you're around that person and you see it, that they are really selfish and self-absorbed, but they don't know it. So here's the weird thing about shadow. Everyone else can see it, but we don't. So we're the last ones to see it. And if two or more people say to you, you're like this, and you resent it, well, you need to listen, because like I had that agreement with the cosmos, if I'm not getting it, keep sending it. And so the universe will put it in your face if you're unwilling to see it. And that can mean marriage number 1, marriage number 2, and marriage number 3. And 40 years later, it can be your roommate. So it's truly interesting how it follows us. Why does it follow us? Because we are all energy. We are all energy, and like attracts like, and opposites attract. We've all heard this statement. Well, now you understand why, that the conscious part of us, the exact opposite, is building up in our unconscious to the same degree by this compensatory factor in the psyche that's compensating for us when we are out of balance. And the problem with getting someone else to be our parts of us that we don't want to be or refuse to live, they're going to live against us. And Jung said that falling in love is 100, oh, here it is. Falling in love is 100% projection, 100%. What is missing in us will be highly attractive in another person. So our 7th house planets and energies, or any oppositions to Venus, and sometimes it can even be a loaded 12th house or 1st house. You don't know exactly what the person is projecting. I mean, the 7th house is a given. We often project the 7th and 8th house energies, but a person can have 4 planets in the 7th house and not even identify with them. Like they may have 4 planets in Leo, and they don't identify with that for whatever reason. And then you meet their husband or wife, And then you see who is living that out for them. So we get somebody else to carry out that part of us that we are refusing to look at. And all of us go on a quest. You know, the seventh house is what we least identify with. And so all of us will go on a quest to find our missing half. And this is what falling in love is all about. Falling into the unconscious. Loving is a completely different thing. And so our gold, the gold about falling in love is that this is me and this is also me. It's about balancing those opposites within us. And doing this shadow work with our partners allows you to get in touch with your own unlived life. And until we live with somebody day in and day out, we don't know them. We gradually get to know them as we are gradually getting to know ourselves. So it is so interesting how the conscious mind doesn't make those decisions. It is the unconscious that falls in love. It is the unconscious part of us that is projecting out onto the other person. And we will make gods and goddesses out of people. That is 100% projection when we put somebody up as a god or a goddess. Well, these are planets, and the planets, all of the planets are messengers. Every relationship is a messenger of the gods, the planets, because the planets are, again, they're archetypes that are in us, that are operating through us. And we are all a different and unique combination of these planets and signs and aspects in the chart. And astrology, it takes years. I mean, you have to be obsessed with it to learn it. It took 5 years of reading and reading and reading and looking at charts for me to start to understand it. It's very difficult to learn because it's a symbolic language. It's a language of its own. And learning about it is, you have to be dedicated to want to learn it really well. When I started studying it, the main focus for me, what I was really, really interested in was relationships. I wanted to understand, why do we have the relationships that we have? You know, why at first we are so attracted and then we become completely repulsed. You know, we do what we really idealized in that person. All of a sudden they're overdoing it, and now we don't like them at all, and we are repulsed. And we can have both attitudes at different times towards the same person. So my teacher Pittman McGee says, if you want the projections to fall off, marry the person. It works every time, because now you're going to see all of them, not just what you were seeing. You know, we're all kind of narcissistic. We see ourselves in that person. Like, we might see this person is extremely kind and they are so giving and generous and fun. And that's a part of us that we're needing to develop. And so that person is living it out for us for a time until they start overdoing it, and then we will not like them. So it is a hook. He called it a hook. When we're so in love, we see what we want to see, but there is so much more. So loving requires the projections to fall off so that you can see who they actually are, not who you wanted them to be, not who you thought they were, but who they actually are. And then learning to dance with them. That's why I call this a shadow dance. And I've written a book about it. It's called The Shadow Dance and the Astrological 7th House Workbook. It is a workbook. There are places to write notes to yourselves as you're reading it, because if you will work with your unconscious will work with you. If you don't pay any attention to your unconscious, if you completely ignore your unconscious, that things are repeating and you just keep being in denial that you have anything whatsoever to do with it, then it just gets harder and harder and harder, and it becomes more and more and more difficult to ascertain and to integrate. But the moment that we decide, okay, this is about me, I'm the common denominator in all these situations, and I'm willing to look, and we start up a dialogue by going within, by writing in a journal, which is why I created this as a journal, so that you could write notes to yourselves, so that you could do the inner work, because this is inner work, going inside our unconscious. And learning that if we don't, it's just going to repeat. Chances are we're doing these things all over the place and we don't know it. Take the person who has Mars in the 7th house. This person is never angry. They do not believe in ever being angry. They want to always be reasonable and balanced and fair and calm. So they keep attracting people who are extremely angry in their face. And this is where you see the person who attracts abusive partners. And this doesn't have to be men being abusive to women. I have a guy that I wrote about. I wrote 4 pages about anger in here because it is so common, that he kept attracting partners who were abusive and angry all the time. And then the 3rd partner for him was a business partner. And now there was money involved and his profession was involved. And so becoming aware of that angry part of himself, that now he had to recognize that he needed to stand up for himself and take the risk of allowing himself to not be ideal, but to be real with his partners. Because that part of us that's split off, again, will live against us. Or say you have the moon there, or the moon ruling that house, and you keep attracting weak, needy people. And weak, needy people, clingy people who, you're just like, I can't even go to the grocery store. And this person is like, did you miss me? They're so needy. And you just think, I can't take this anymore. Where at first it was so attractive that they were so, engaged and so into you. And then all of a sudden they're too into you and you're wanting to peel them off of you. Well, learning to express feelings, learning to express emotions, being willing to ask for what you need and not being stoic and I don't need anyone. When a person has that attitude, I don't need anyone. Well, they do need other people, and that part of them has gone into the unconscious, and that part of them is now overdeveloped in the opposite. So these complexes are formed. He said we form these complexes, and a complex will show that it's autonomous, it's compulsive. It'll act out behind our own back, and we don't even know it. We'll act a certain way, and then we'll shock ourselves because that's not who we are, or that's not who we identify with. Well, as an astrologer, I can tell you that everything in your birth chart has to be lived by you. Eventually, you have to live every single part of your birth chart out. And learning about your birth chart is not a 1-hour consultation. You can go to 6 astrologers and they're all going to give you their take on it and how they see it, and they'll ask you different questions. So it's a tool. Astrology is a tool for self-awareness like no other, because it has the blueprint of your energy. And we know this as astrologers, after years and years and years, but just because we know something doesn't mean we've integrated it. It doesn't. I know a lot of different astrologers, myself included, this is not them, it's all of us that see things in others, that we don't want to be, that we refuse to identify with, that we refuse to voice our opinion about or whatever. And again, we're needing to grow. The only reason that person was in your face was because the universe was asking you to look at that part of you. So parts of us that we disown, that we refuse to be, and no one knows their whole self. In effect, when we get married, we are strangers. We are. There's a really cool song in my book by Martina McBride about strangers that I just love, because it says two people. Let's see if I can find it. I should have marked it. Let me look real quick, because at first it's so romantic. The world's greatest lovers have now become strangers, because if you think about it, at first you're the greatest lovers. There is an intoxication, there's a fascination, there's an intoxication, there is a sexual and erotic component to it, because erotically the sexual energy is about wanting to merge with ourselves. We don't realize that. We don't realize that that is a metaphor for, that our sexual erotic attractions are seeing a dynamic of our own self. And again, they can live it for you, or you can integrate it by having a conscious dialogue with yourself and with your partner. I'm not kidding, all of our exes or our present relationships were chosen by our own unconscious. And once you start to do this, once you really recognize that this is the only way that you're going to learn about yourself, my teacher, Pittman McGee, he also said in his book, The Paradox of Love, paradoxically, I alone must become myself, but I cannot become myself alone. So Venus in all of our charts is a symbol for the inner beloved. We need that mirror. There is a sacred marriage taking place in everyone. And it all goes back. This all goes back to, it begins with our parents. My Scorpio mom was so secretive and so quiet and so uncommunicative. So if I asked my husband anything, he would answer in one-word phrases or one-word syllables, like, how are you? Fine. This is about as much as he would share. Well, I happen to have the fortune to meet my ex-husband's ex-girlfriend. I ran into her at a service bureau because we were both in advertising. And she was in advertising too, and I met her in a parking lot. And I really liked her. And after they broke up, my son would say to me, I really miss Suzanne, Mom. I really miss Suzanne. So after I met her, I asked her birth information, and I go home and I run her chart out, and I find out that we were a lot alike. And a few weeks go by and he calls me for something. And I said, Ed, I met Suzanne in a parking lot. And he goes, oh, that's it. I really liked her. Nothing. So we talked for a minute and hung up. So I called him back and I said, was she a lot like me? The silence was amazing. He didn't say anything. And I said, are you still looking for me? And he said, goodbye, Rebecca. And he hung up on me. And I sat there for a minute, and then I thought, am I still looking for you? The last boyfriend I was with was very quiet and very secretive, the same way. So it's so interesting. So I called him back and he put the answering machine on. He wouldn't answer the phone. And I left him a message and I just said, I just got it. I just got it. I'm also looking out there looking for you. So it was a light bulb when that happened. And so these light bulbs will go off on us when we really get these things. Most of the time they're so unconscious, we don't understand what we're doing. And we live in a world of fast food relationships. And we become intimate with people before we even know the person. We trust them with our bodies even. And then we're in fear that they will leave us. Most of the time we already left ourselves. So we might as well get ready, because sooner or later they'll leave us too. So I tell people, slow down. Get to know someone before you project your ideal onto them. They are human, just like everybody else. And trust is earned. It's not had as a gift. They're probably carrying your unlived life. So I no longer look at rejection as negative. I see it as an opportunity to love yourself more. And, a long time ago, there was this popular book on the market, He's Not Into You. Well, he's not into his projection of you, because psychologically, that is so naive. They don't understand what the unconscious is actually doing with our relationships. And shadow work is not toxic. I said that earlier, and I'm going to explain that. Shadow work is not toxic. There are relationships that can't be fixed. Somebody asked me today, so what about the relationships that cannot be fixed? Well, not all relationships are tenable, and we can't stay with just everybody. If we have somebody who's an alcoholic, who cannot hold a job, who cannot stay sober, that is really destructive to our lives, or if we have a drug addict, or if we have somebody who is very infantile and extremely obnoxious in the sense that they want attention all the time, that they're constantly drawing attention to themselves in a very difficult way. It's over the top. They're more like a child, and everybody in the room is uncomfortable. Everybody in the room is uncomfortable when they're in that person's presence, because of their desire or their need to be, the focus of attention 100% of the time, or when they're up in front of everybody, they are being like that. There's lots of different things that are rather toxic. That you can have compassion for that person, you can have compassion for your partner, but that person needs to do their own work. They need to go and get professional help, and you cannot fix and save them. And those of us with Venus Neptune who think that we can fix everyone, that was a repeating pattern I went through, where I thought I could save people, and then finally I realized, if I was so healthy, what would I be doing with them? So I had to take it back on myself and save myself. So I tell people, vote for yourself, take care of yourself. And we are all heading towards healing and wholeness. We are all heading towards healing and wholeness, but everyone has to want to do this work. Everyone has to do it for themselves. We cannot fix or change or heal anyone. And interestingly enough, when we start changing, when we start embracing the parts of us that are out of balance, automatically the other person starts to do the work too. But it's so much nicer if we have a partner who's conscious, who's willing to sit and have a conversation about this. And the seventh house is it's an air house. Air means communication. We have to have this kind of honest and authentic communication with each other in order to see the parts of us that are out of balance. And we have to be able to take it, have the ego strength when somebody points out something to us that we don't see. We have to have the ego strength to own it, to look at, where are they coming from? Do they have our back? Do they want to say this to us because they're wanting to help us? Or are they wanting to be negative and be in control of us? Or are they denigrating us and putting us down? It's all in how they say it, and it's all their intention. And you can feel that through energy. You can feel the energy of a person who really cares for you and is telling you something because you actually need to know about it. So I like this statement. Our kids get to see all of us, our male and our female, because we're safe with our kids. They can't leave us. So the best thing to do when we're in a relationship is to use both sides, our feminine and our masculine. And when we are a woman, we have a masculine side, and all men have a feminine inside of them. These are the partners, these are the invisible partners that we have that are choosing our relationships. So if we find that we've continually attracted somebody who wasn't there for us, then we have to take it back. We have to say, I wasn't there for me. I didn't ask to get my needs met. I didn't stand up for myself. I expected them to do it and they didn't. And then it got to where I didn't want to have anything to do with that person anymore. Well, again, that's a projection. And what if, here's another part. What if you have the conversations? What if you have the conversations with the other person? I need you to do this, this, and this, and step up to the plate. And they refuse to do it. And you ask them again and they refuse to do it again. Well, that's called passive aggressive behavior, where they say, I'm going to do this or that, and then they don't. So you will know by the way this is handled between two people. Aggressiveness and passive aggressiveness can go back and forth between people as well. But there is no human being alive that isn't continually working on themselves. And just because I've been teaching this for 30 years doesn't mean I'm not through. I'm still working on this. So we all are working on ourselves, and we all have to continue to work on ourselves. And that's why I call it shadow work. It is work because it takes a lot of self-honesty. It does. It takes a lot of courage to do this work. But I promise you, it is so worth it. And if you have another person that is willing to do it with you, what a boon. What a boon that partner is to you. The other thing that is really cool is, let's see if I can get my mouse over here. The ancients at the Temple of Delphi said, know thyself and nothing in excess. Two very wise statements that the Greeks made long ago. And these are still on the Temple of Delphi in Greece. And we all have heard these statements. Know thyself. We have to learn about who we are. That's what becoming conscious is all about. And no one, I'm not kidding, no one, I don't care how many PhDs you have. I don't care if you've been a psychiatrist forever. No one knows their whole self. We're still all in process, or we wouldn't still be here. And whenever we're unwilling to acknowledge something and create the balance for ourselves, we will attract it from the outside. And as Carl Jung said, it will happen outside as fate. Yes, because there is a teleology in life, and teleology just means it's leading somewhere. It wants something from us. So we can have a completely different worldview and a totally different way of looking at what happens to us now, because we can say, oh, you're trying to help me? The unconscious, the cosmos is trying to help me? How cool is that? We have to learn to generate this life for ourselves. And when I'm integrating myself, then I can share my life with you. Reciprocity is healthy respect and doing things for each other where there is interdependence, not codependence, where I need you to generate life for me. And if you're not there, I can't live. Well, that is codependence, and codependence is out. We have to generate life for ourselves, and it is a painfully slow process. No one is going to do this overnight, and things will endlessly repeat until we decide we want to take a look at what does it mean. Jung described this process as circular. He said it comes around and around. One night I was sitting with two friends of mine describing this, and I was telling him that Jungians call this holding the tension between the opposites. And as we were sitting there and I was describing this is what my friend drew on the paper. Look at what his unconscious revealed to us, an image of the process and the goal of shadow work, which is getting to the middle, to the I am, right there at the center. And notice how these sides are equal in measure. What's one side is going to be equally the opposite on the other side. And as we become more conscious, we're contributing to the cosmos. So every time these patterns come around, they become easier and easier if you can own it. And it gives you a lot of compassion for yourself and for others. So positive thinking and living a spiritually aware and joy-filled and purposeful life is not all positive, and it's not all negative. We can just as easily project our goodness onto another person and allow them to carry that for us. So taking responsibility for what comes to us is no easy task. Ed Edinger said it is exceedingly difficult. So we have to be patient with ourselves. We are all in process, but the reward for doing shadow work is love. Love for others and for ourself, our whole self, our authentic self. And our self-esteem will grow to the degree that now we know more of our whole self, which includes our strengths and our weaknesses. We can now consciously make the effort to balance with our partners, and this benefits both of us because we are no longer lopsided. So again, no one does this overnight. We are all in process. It takes time. Be patient with yourself and be patient with your partners, because the reward is love. And loving others and balancing ourselves is symbolic in the sign of Libra. Libra rules the 7th house. It's about equality and love and balance. And the ultimate goal is the inner integration of the opposites, our own sacred marriage. That's where we're all headed in the age of Aquarius. The Pisces age of sacrificing and suffering is over. Truth and freedom to be our real authentic selves is where we're headed in the Aquarian age. And it's a great way to live, you know, knowing that synchronistically the universe has always had our back. It's a great way to live. So thank you for coming to hear me tonight at our site, Your Light. I'm available for one-on-one consultations. My website is shadowdance.com. And I do a lot of different consultations, and I do shadow work with people. So coming to see me is not a one-time thing. It's a several thing, because if you want to know yourself, I'll go there with you and help you go there, you know, and bring things up that may be painful to look at, but once, like a boil, once that pain is released, it is now transformed because it's conscious. So I do have the workbook, and I also have an online webinar called Shadow Work in Your 7th House for people who don't like to read. There are audios and videos and cartoons and things to download and questions to ask yourself in the online webinar. It's $50, a one-time fee for life. It's regular $99, but right now it is $50 for any person. Each person pays that. And that way you do it together. You sit and watch videos and talk about it. And I do also want to say that I appreciate everybody that is coming to our site, Your Light, because everybody that is willing to do inner work is contributing to the whole evolution of the cosmos. We are all part of it. Thank you for coming.